My father is a pastor at a church. Well, he has a pretty deep, dark secret. He's been doing some very bad things to his kids, and I'm going to expose it in front of everybody at the church for the monster that he truly is. Maybe my story is one of the worst you'll ever hear, read in your entire life, but I hope with all my heart that it has a happy ending. Just so you understand, my father's a pastor at the local church, one of the most important and recognized churches in almost the entire state. Hosting events and many festivities and being the home of the young and old. However, behind the cheerful and colorful facade of the church hides a secret to horrible, or rather, not so much in the church but in the walls of my house. My father, a man who appears to the public eye as a gentle pastor full of kindness, forgiveness, and tenderness, is a monster to those closest to him. I plucked the courage to finally write these words, knowing that it may be something anonymous, since if someone finds out, it could cause not only a family conflict but a large-scale problem on a religious level, to have a figure that everyone's almost the reincarnation, being an abuser in every measure. Well, maybe I exaggerate a little, but to everybody, my dad is a saint. And even if he commits the greatest of sins, I feel that he won't be absolved of all of them. Something that does not seem fair to me. First, I'll tell you about him. He's a man who, when he leaves the house, is all smiles and handshakes, pretending that everything is fine in his life, and of course, how could it not be if he takes out all his anger on everyone in the house? We're 4 siblings. 3 boys and 1 girl. I'm the oldest, and we've been victims of abuse for as long as we can remember. One of my brothers even talks about a memory he has from when he was a baby, about how, quote, Daddy squeezed his little hand hard. And I believed him because I was there that day when he cried, when he was like 3 years old. I must have been about 9. That's one of the reasons I'm writing this, because his abuse can have repercussions in our mind. And I don't want my siblings to go through something like that. I don't want anyone to go through something like that. I continue. Father smiles when he leaves the house, but inside it's like the shadow changes his personality, beginning to shout and demand things left and right. Maybe the one who has it worse is my little sister, because recently she started with her feminine things, and it was the starting point for Dad to become the devil himself. Pardon the expression. Right off the bat, I'll say it and reveal it to all you. I'm an atheist because I ended up feeling that all people in the church are dark beings, and even though I know better, when you live with an abuser like that, you tend to have some pretty bad thoughts. Gosh, there's so many things I want to talk about with that guy. For example, there was a day when my brothers and I were playing around the house, and we accidentally knocked over one of the kettles that Mom was using to heat some coffee. It sounded pretty harsh, and my dad showed up almost instantly in a rage. When he saw us, caught us red-handed, he told one of my brothers to pick up the kettle, being that it was still hot, so he burned his hand in the process. And to this day, he still has small but noticeable marks on the palm of his hand. We just kept quiet and stopped playing, going to our rooms. That was the last time we played so lively, and every time, years later, that our little sister would ask to play with her, we would relive the memories, so we flatly refused. And before you wonder, no, my mother does not do much about it because she lives in constant fear that something bad will happen to her. And I know that abuse towards her can get worse. Even though I'm in my early 20s, I'm not one to defend myself against abusers for obvious reasons. My slim build is nothing compared to my father, who weighs almost 4 times as much as me. Standing up to him would be like an ant trying to bite down an entire tree. My mom tells me that he was not like that in the past and that he was a loving man. But as the years went by and with the arrival of his children, he began to adopt a more aggressive behavior. Of course, to everybody else, we were the perfect family, a standard for what a model family should be, and at that point my mom was even playing the same game, to keep pretending to be something we were not. I know she cries inside, but even if that's the case, she still doesn't know the worst kind of abuse that's happened. I don't really want to go into too much detail, but what someone imagines when you think of a church man with children around, well, in our case it's like that. Yes, we also suffered that kind of abuse from him, terrible, and although they have not been as strong as one might suppose, they've left us with scarred traumas. Just hearing him say anything about us revealing anything makes my stomach churn, but as time goes by, I'm getting more and more confident enough to stand up to him and confront him. Oh, I forgot to tell you, because of him, I'm not in shape. I mean, he expressly asked the people at the gym not to accept me in their rankings, since he knew that if I got to train, I'd be in a position to defend us in case of a new abuse. He doesn't molest me as much as he used to nowadays, but my brothers are still in the same line, and that worries us most is our little sister, although she's the one that he's least interested in. He seems to have a predilection for young males, and I'm afraid that some parishioners are going through the same situation. He got bored with me when I came of age and is losing interest in my brother since he's about to be 17. But my other brother and my little sister are in the eye of the storm. The worst thing is we can't do anything about it because he has contacts everywhere. I found out recently that years ago, when he was not yet in church, he had done some shady jobs, but I don't know what kind, and that made him have connections everywhere, to the point of being considered untouchable. But it doesn't matter, because even if I annoy anyone says anything about him, no one will believe that the loving pastor who fills the pews every Sunday, even with people from our neighboring cities, and who gives the best and most hilarious sermons, can't even hurt a fly. We feel like we're in a game of cat and mouse. I'm writing this today to let off some steam because I know that, like us, many people around the world go through the same situation, and that's why I decided to study law. My father looks at us sideways because he knows that I can denounce him at any time. But he also sees it in a sense that his son will become a lawyer. So he has someone in his favor at the legal level. A little sorry for abusing me, huh, Father? Update number 1. I want to believe that this is real, if it's a sign from the Lord for me to act now. My father made an announcement a couple days ago that's left me wondering. He's retiring from the church and will be passing the leadership to a young pastor, a friend of his, with whom he has a conversation for a few months. This strikes me because it means that he'll be leaving the regular activities of the church to move to a more passive organization level, and, according to me, would give him more scope to go unnoticed regarding his abuses. Something I cannot allow, and feel I must do something about it. Just the thought of seeing him get away with almost 20 years of child abuse makes my stomach churn, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how to proceed if something bad happens, and I know no one can help us. And going to the authorities isn't really an option because of something that happened years ago. Let's just say that in the States, churches have been having these bad reputations for these sort of cases in the past, and it was believed that my father, being a parent, was exempt from this. Big mistake. So if they find out about this, there could be repercussions as big as shutting down the church itself. If I do this, it must be in such a way that neither my siblings nor I can be harmed. But for that, I have to do my research. Sometimes I'm afraid to talk to my mother about these things, because, well, she's become a slave to my father. You would have seen her on her birthday in May. That woman uttered 3 sentences the day with the saddest, faintest smile. No one said anything because nobody saw her. It was a private celebration where we bought a cake and ate it amongst ourselves. However, when it's my father's birthday, it's almost like a holiday. Everybody starts gathering in the churchyard, food, music, games for the children. Every time I see that kind of thing, every time I see people glorifying a monster, it makes me realize that maybe I'm not so wrong to believe that there's no God in this world. If that were the case, I would let the authorities put that man in jail. I no longer see him as a dad, a father, a pastor, or a human. I saw a movie the other day about a church abusing of minors and how they used to hide their evidence very well, even getting help from law enforcement and religious authorities. It was a very good movie, and I watched it at one of my friends' houses. One of them even joked about it with my father. Several of my friends lashed out at him, considering that joke was too heavy, but for me, it wasn't, because it was very attached to the truth. Be careful with your father. Suddenly, it didn't sound so much like a joke, more like a warning. It's too bad it was too late for me, and in a little research I did on the internet, I discovered that many of the cases of abuse of minors by priests or pastors comes when they're older. They fail to satiate their biological urges, and they take it out on the weaker ones. My father at least did not practice celibacy, but that does not leave him exempt from any of the recklessness with minors. As hopeless as it seems, I'll try to bring him down and make the whole world realize what a terrible monster he is. And if I don't succeed, well, I hope this blog will serve as a few last words, as crude as that sounds. Update number 2. There's going to be a party at the church. Let's see, it's been a week since I last wrote, and I learned 2 pieces of information that'll help me with what I'm planning. The first thing is that there will be a farewell party for my dad, where the church will say goodbye to him after several years of service. Half the city will be there, and I think it would be perfect time to proceed with the plan. I say this because since everybody will be there, it's impossible for the police to advocate for him. I mean, in what situation where several people accuse an individual do they end up being the ones arrested? And I say several people because that's the other point. I'm getting help, and some time ago I found out that one of my brother's classmates was sick. But according to my brother, it was all a lie, because he said he saw him in the streets looking very normal, and when he confronted him, he told him that he did not feel well going to school anymore, and that he was going to move soon. You'll say that has nothing to do with it, but when I found out who the boy was, I knew who he was. He's the youngest son of a family parishioner who always hung out at a church, with my father being very close to the boy, a rare thing. I have goosebumps just thinking about the situation, so it's not that weird that the abuse has come out of our nuclear family, and it's something to take into consideration for this plan. I'd like to talk to him and others to get as many witnesses as possible, but there's a little problem. Although it may not seem like it, I've done a lot of research on the subject of child abuse. Apparently, it is common for many people who have been through such events to be left with lifelong repercussions, including a sense of not wanting to be the center of attention. In fact, according to several interviews with people who went through this experience, they would not have been able to do anything on their own initiative because they considered themselves too small and had inferiority complexes. They said things like, "I was a child who would pay attention to a child," and discouraging scenarios because I'm like that too, but I have to put my fear first for the greater good. Now, the issue is to be able to get all these people, all these young people, to rise against him without my father or anyone else knowing about it. The way someone goes with the gossip, it all comes crashing down, and I can say goodbye to my life as I've known it. Although I shudder at the thought of all these bitter scenarios, I understand that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that I must not squander. The next update will be on the whole plan turned out and how viable it may become, but so far, beware of your priests and pastors. Update number 3. I hate my father. Now, I'm not afraid to say it. I hate him with all my heart and soul. In the sermon just now, he started talking about respecting children and how they are, quote, the most beautiful gift God has given us, and that disgusts me to the core. I felt like getting up right there and calling him a hypocrite in front of everyone. But I felt alone amid a sea of sheep who were unsuspecting of the wolf in front of them. Every word that came out was a new scenario where I imagined him behind bars receiving the maximum penalty. Let his name appear in the news and feel humiliation and amongst the whole world. Never mind being associated with him. At least his web of lies would stop, and I think I know how to achieve that. If all goes well, in a month I'll be changing our lives radically, but if everything goes wrong, well, let's not think about that for the moment. I told you in the last update that a party would be taking place to say goodbye to my father from the church, so that's when everything will be done. I'm very nervous, but I'm determined, and somehow I feel I can't back out. I've already talked to my brother's friend, approaching him about it, and although it was not easy, he managed to tell me in detail everything that happened, and I won't say anything out of respect, but it was similar to what we went through. Only for my father, it was little more difficult because he had to build some trust with the boy first. But in itself, I found out that he's not an isolated case. There are other boys that my father has given private visits to, and that makes my hair stand on end. How's it possible that a person manages to get away with it for so long? Is that no one's ever stood up to him? It's horrible that it has to be me, his own son, who has to step forward, and my brothers don't know about this yet, but eventually I'll tell them to help me. They're still young, and they have my father's gaze closer than ever, and since I came of age, he's lost an interest in me. But every time I call him on something, he yells at me and threatens me with his belt. An extremely medieval punishment. Update number 4. I want to take just a few moments to breathe, because tomorrow is my father's event at church, and I gathered a large number of boys. They were almost 20 young men, of whom only 2 were females, who were prepared to testify against my father. The stories I heard were heartbreaking, and although I went through many more houses, only 20, including myself and my siblings, stepped forward. I have no words to describe the disgust and horror that all these boys had to go through in their lives, and I won't tell you case-by-case traumas this man has left, but let me tell you that there are some really sad stories, and I don't understand how they have not moved from that place. It is as if my father was the puppet master of one of the most atrocious acts of all time. And I know he's not alone, so I had to seek all the help I could get. My mother still doesn't know anything, and I'm afraid that the other children will turn down tomorrow without raising their voices to denounce this crime. In the opposite case, I would like those who decided not to step forward to also come forward to speak up. It's now that I understand the phrase, "United we stand the most," but I fear that our enemy is too big for us. Updates number 5. So, I don't know how to begin these words. I don't know how to feel. I'm supposed to feel good, but after all the drama, well, it's hard, and I've had to throw up a couple times to try to ease the stomach ache that I've had. Let's see, I'll start with an event that almost made the whole plan backfire. It's truly been the scariest moment of my life. It was all because I started gathering information about my dad's victims, but almost got caught when 2 of them showed up at my front door while I was at a friend's house. Had my father been there, I would have been suspicious, and might even have discovered the plan I had more time. But by a stroke of luck, my younger brother attended, telling the boys to come later, and I found out when I returned I had to contact them so this mistake would never happen again. Anyways, a few days later, an event began. I understood that the mayor would make an appearance to say a few words, and my plan was risky, and I knew it would be worthy of a movie. Seriously, I thought this was one of the craziest and most bizarre situations anyone could ever experience, and I was going to insert an extra sheet into the mayor's speech so that he would deliver it in the middle of the crowd, telling everyone about my father's actions, and in the middle of the crowd, we would all be young people affected by the situation, who would face our aggressor without him being able to defend himself. I know it sounds silly and even cartoonish, but at the time I saw it as the best plan in the world, and on the day of the event it seemed to be. Everything had started in the most routine way possible. Food, music, chairs in front of the church, the whole stage, and my father was smiling, greeting everybody and shaking their hands, and when it was time for the speeches to begin, I tried to keep an eye for the mayor's technical team, seeing if any secretaries or assistants were in sight, and I saw a slightly overweight man who had some papers in his hand, and I told him that the mayor should read this, as it was part of the pastor's speech. The man, amid all the fuss, accepted it and nodded, and I don't think he even listened to me at all, because he just took the sheet and that was it. Well, he received the mayor. However, when it came time for the speech, everything went normally without any hiccups, and the letter was never read. I stood there looking at others, shivering in a cold sweat, and I felt like I was going to faint. But I managed to come to my senses a few minutes later. I don't remember well what happened right after my dad's speech ended. I only know then that about half an hour later some police showed up in the area. I heard that the letter was read before the speech, but they preferred to give it to the mayor afterward. Maybe it was the fat man, I don't know. The latter did the same and sent for the officers. Maybe it was not as climatic a moment as they wanted, but it was still shocking to the eyes of the present to see the pastor was being held by police. Then our family was questioned, and that was the moment when I spoke up. I told the officer in charge that I've given the letter and that many of the victims were here. That's when the drama came. People started talking, and the families were surprised when I pointed to the children to come to testify. Some of them were very overwhelmed and denied being part of the situation, and I remember the heartbreaking cries of many parents when they heard the news. The pastor is a child abuser. There was a historic couple which made a big fuss. The woman kept crying and hugging her son while the man cursed everything from the family to the church itself. It was quite a bitter scene. And now we are in the present, and the news came out of the news portals of the city. But everything was done to keep it from transcending. Many people have been left out of the affair and have accused us of complicity, but it's only a matter of time before investigations begin. I can't help but feel relieved after all this. The plan itself was very absurd, but somehow it all came together. Or, well, not at all. My father will face trial in a few days, and as soon as I hear about it, I want to disassociate myself from the matter. I don't want to know anything more about that man, and I was forbidden to get close to the members of the affected families. Even knowing that it was me who orchestrated all of this is as much for my safety as for the safety of other people. Better for me, as I want nothing to do with that guy for the rest of my life. Update number 6. Hey guys, it's been about 6 months, and only now that I feel I'm in a position to write. I'm sorry if I got worried about the lack of updates. It has not been that easy, but at least we've been able to enjoy some peace. Truth be told, that's a word I felt was alien to me. Peace. I'll explain in parts everything that ended up happening. On my family side, my mother cried, and I felt like she still does sometimes. It's not easy to take a hit like that, but at no time has she ever been upset with me. What's more, of the few interactions we've had regarding the subject, she only said thank you to me on one occasion. To me, that's gold. Sure, gossip has been our bread and butter, but we'd rather have that than have a monster under our roof. As for my siblings, they're quite relieved, and although my little sister cries a lot, I'm glad she did not go through what I did, and what I see as the most positive thing about all this is she'll be able to have a loving upbringing, free from abuse from anyone. Ironically, this experience has brought all of us siblings closer. We talk more about our stuff now, and we tend to laugh about our experiences. I'm still in college, focusing on my studies, while my other brother is considering what to do next. He has a predilection for psychology, and it would never hurt to have a psychologist in the family. It's been a while since I stopped getting updates about my dad. I know my mom usually gets them, but she understands that we don't care. She sees us as happy, and she doesn't want to ruin it. For those of you who it makes feel better, I feel like my dad was not entirely welcome in prison. It's well known what they do to abusers. It's not pretty. Forgive me for this moment of weakness, but even I felt sorry for him, and at the end of the day, he's still my dad. And I inevitably think about how he is now. Concerning the other abuse victims, it's been a bit complicated when I told you that it had not all been easy. It was about that part. Many of those families demanded compensation for all the harm done to their children, including financial compensation, and a lot of that fell on my mom. Of course, we argued that those parents saw their children's condition as an excuse to have money, but even all the money in the world won't repair the psychological damage caused by such an experience. We were able to compensate them with psychologist appointments, but beyond taking my father to jail, there was nothing we could do about it. A channel approached us to focus and discuss the rights of prudence of making a case public. Like any media boom, when they hear about this, the production houses translate it as revenue. And even if it looks bad, it may help us on the offset of operating expenses and compensating the families. They want to make a documentary about the case. Even though we're embarrassed, we feel that we should do it, show the world that the possible threat that lies in the home and in the churches.
Well, this was a very shocking story, but I think the most shocking part about this entire story was the fact that the comment sections, there was a lot of people where they've been through something similar, maybe not to the exact extent that OP went through, but very, very close, and I was just thinking to myself, how often does this happen? Guys, I want to know your thoughts about this story. If you were in OP's tough position, do you think that you would have come forward a bit sooner or done something different? I know it's so difficult to understand the exact perspective from OP, but let's talk about it in the comment section downstairs. Guys, let me know your thoughts. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories like this every single day. If you want to be a part of the channel, all you gotta do is click that subscribe button. Today's story was very sad and gut-wrenching, to say the least, but I still want to hear your thoughts about it. I'll see you guys tomorrow. It's cool to be kind. See ya.